Welcome to the Spatialedge AI Industry Insights Show. I'm your host, Pierre, and today with us, we've got a special guest, Stefan Steffen. So Stefan is the group head of data and AI at Telkom. He has previously held positions such as being lead data scientist at PCX, head of customer retention and data management at Old Mutual, and he's quite prolific when it comes to sharing ideas within the South African data space and attending conferences and such. Please allow me to welcome Stefan. Hi, Stefan.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's great to be here.
So, Stefan, let's get started with, I'd like to know a little bit more bits and pieces about, or maybe your origin story of where you come from, what kind of makes you in terms of where you've come today.
Sure. Wow, that's a deep question, Pierre.
A deep one to start.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think, I guess I'm quite passionate about life. And so everything I do, I kind of try and do flat out. I love people and outdoors. I guess in terms of my career, heard about a thing called actuarial science when I was in standard 9, grade 11 now. Didn't really know what that was, and did a bit of scouting at some of the insurance companies, and didn't quite like what I experienced, but for some reason still committed and ended up doing actuarial science. Loved it. So it was really a fantastic start for my career. Early on, had the opportunity to kind of get into quite diverse areas of the business. Started working at Old Mutual originally, and I think probably from that first job that I had, really that love for diversity kind of was instilled in me, and so all of the jobs that I took since that first one, I've really been after diverse environments with significant challenges. And so don't like just doing one thing. I think kind of towards the end of the actuarial side of my career, started getting into more the analytics space, machine learning application in my last job in insurance, and then had the opportunity to kind of move into data science and AI, and have not looked back. Yeah, I loved it ever since.
What made you kind of transition in the beginning from more actuarial to more data science or data focused?
Yeah, I think in the actuarial world, we love numbers, love data. So I think there's a natural fit. I think you have to be proficient.
So you're all kind of in the world there.
Absolutely. So when you start studying, you do a lot of stats, and so I think you're kind of, there's a good foundation. And then as I kind of progressed in my career, realized that a lot of the problems that we're trying to address, we need to do it in a data-oriented way. Even operationally, in my last role as an actuary, I was head of customer retention, so both on the strategy side as well as operationally. So for the operational part, I had the privilege of running a 200-seat call center, and so that helped us execute on a lot of the retention strategy. And so we started kind of blending some of the data science techniques into the call center operations. It's a great place to kind of test machine learning models here, if you identify which customers are higher risk or more likely to pay. All of those use cases we could apply in that operational context and see quite good uplift. So that got me into kind of the use of machine learning in a business context, and then from there had an opportunity to kind of make that my day job. Yeah.
So in some way, it was more needs driven. As you were progressing through your career, there was opportunities that came along and to start entering into the space and start solving problems within the organization, within the Old Mutual where you were. And it's like, okay, well, I'm used to numbers, I'm used to the data in some way or form, but let's see how we can apply it here. Let's see other ways we can start applying it, and obviously managing that and getting that sorted.
100%. Yeah, no, that's right. To give you an example, you would have kind of execs coming back from a conference, and I remember one of our execs coming back and seeing an example of what I think it was F&B at the time had done around next best action. So they had implemented next best action started out in their branches, kind of on their ATMs, in their call centers, and And so this was something that Old Mutual then wanted to pursue as well. And so, so that idea kind of germinates, and then I love tackling new problems. So kind of got saddled with that, and I mean that's just fantastic, and absolutely leads you into the world of data science and machine learning now.
What I love about that is almost there's new opportunities and other difficult problems, but a little bit of an audacity to tackle them and try and address them and see how you can make them work in an organization. It's pretty cool. One of the things that so this is interesting now, and I maybe want to explore this one a little bit. So personally, I've done computer science, I've built systems, and then I transitioned over now to marketing and sales here at Spatialedge and managing that side of things. And for me, it was interesting because in developing and building stuff, it's very I want to say the word introvert, but it's focused. It is unemotional. It is basically you're struggling and circling with a computer and trying to get stuff solved there, but it's contained in one environment. There's no emotions involved.
Yeah.
But when you move towards working with people or working, I guess, with clients and things like that, there's a lot more emotions suddenly involved. It's a lot of different thinking. It's faster thinking. It's not as deep thought that you can do. It's more interactive thoughts, that kind of thing. So for me, there's a very clear, interesting difference between the two worlds. On the one hand, you've got a focused, introspective, problem solving in a mechanical way. On the other hand, you've got problem solving, but in dynamic and much more interactive and emotional way. That's how I kind of perceive the two worlds. It's quite, my interesting perception. But now what I'd like to ask you is, in terms of your experience from actuary versus going into management, if you can, so I was assuming if you can still remember how going into management, how do you perceive that? How did you experience that? Is any tidbits that you can maybe share?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I'm also an introvert by nature, much more reflective, analytical, and so I guess that from there the kind of leaning towards actuarial science and those kind of careers. So early on in my career, but still love engaging with people, and I guess that's where where some of the early on kind of team management exposure came from. But typically in the actuarial context, you manage small teams. Teams are like 3 or 4 people, maybe up to 10. And so it was really in that retention context that I for the first time had to lead a large team or a business effectively, so more than 200 people. And what was really fascinating about that is that we had up to that point in my career, I'd only managed specialists, so only like people, and so typically specialists are driven and particular detail oriented, and so there's a certain way that you manage that, and so when I started managing this broader business, you're now suddenly dealing with staff across all kind of different types of roles, from call center agents to supervisors, managers, more operations oriented, and so that was just a tremendous experience. So I mean, I remember kind of coming into the offices in the morning and walking the floor. And so what call center, what the people loved is for you to be visible. Now, as an introvert, that was completely opposite to my nature. So I would walk in and then have to be quite loud. First of all, greet everyone and make a scene and be visible, because that's what the team needed to be motivated and to kind of know that I'm kind of leading from the front and not just sitting in my office kind of looking at the numbers. And so I think that had a tremendous impact on my life and how I lead, what I know people need from you as a leader. And so, yeah, I felt quite privileged to have that opportunity. And even though I'm now back in a position where I'm much more managing specialists, I think you do see that people are different, even as specialists, and so it's important. But that visibility remains. Hey, people want to see their leader. They need to hear from you. So I think those were valuable lessons at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually quite a nice takeaway there, is in terms of being visible, knowing how to almost talk to people and how to manage them and what they need from you, such that they can obviously do their jobs. But another thing that I'm kind of want to ask there is, I'm assuming it must have been difficult to transition from that role to this bigger role, and obviously kudos, well done to actually doing that and being capable and learning that, I guess, that other side or that other skill of doing that. Is there any lessons? So let's say there is somebody out there who'd love to transition from, like, they are more introverted and they would love to be more in a leadership role. I mean, is there anything you can maybe recommend or anything you can say in terms of your experience of what you learned that you believe would help somebody in those shoes?
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership is not. So I think leadership is not management. I think there's. I mean, you can lead and learn to lead in whatever position you have, even if you're not managing people. So I think, and there's a skill to managing people versus leadership. So I think it's important to understand that distinction and to know that even before you're kind of entering then into kind of a role where you are leading a team or a business. You can practice those skills and develop those skills, whether that's kind of how you run projects kind of as a specialist, or if you're taking on kind of tackling side issues. So, for example, in a business or a team, there's always a lot to do here. Someone needs to manage training and personal development, or look at some of the culture activities that you need to get to kind of manage the values within the business, and so put your hand up. Take on some of those challenges, lead, and start practicing it. I think that was very valuable for me. So don't stand back. You have to get involved. Yeah, I think that's probably maybe some of the things that are top of mind for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see. So for me, the one thing is I can see how sometimes things can almost get a little bit uncomfortable because it's not what you use. It's not what your safe space, especially if you're coming from a background of, look, you've done let's say it's you're a data scientist now. You've done well as a data scientist. You've done well in terms of building out the models. You've done well in terms of understanding how everything works, making recommendations, leading small specialized teams. But then obviously that transition into a bigger role, into something else, into having a broader impact. It's just a different but a new set of skills. One of the things I've experienced in that regard is it can be challenging because now suddenly you're not as competent in the beginning in that role. I mean, you're not competent almost at all because you don't have the skills.
Yeah.
But yet, and then it'll take time as you exercise those skills or get better at it.
No, very uncomfortable. I mean, so when I moved from actuarial science into data science, I was stepped into a kind of a lead role, but didn't have the technical credentials. So the people in my team were much smarter than me and had kind of the ability to deliver technically, which I couldn't necessarily. And so absolutely, it's uncomfortable. You learn a lot, and that's one of the amazing things that, I mean, it just puts you on so making changes like that in your career just puts you on a different growth trajectory. So that's awesome, and so I encourage those types of changes, not just into leadership, but just finding some new opportunities every now and again to keep yourself growing. But still, sometimes I guess feel like I don't know what I'm doing. That fear of being found out. I guess all people struggle with that to some extent, and so that's natural. So you need to know that and have grace with yourself. But I've loved every bit of it.
Especially, this is the one thing when you mentioned that, my thoughts, my head went to the point where if the bar is high as well, like you've got a certain level of things that you'd love to achieve, and you've got milestones that's maybe aggressive, I don't know, in terms of where your skill set's at, but they're there, you want to achieve them. And I was like, okay, cool. How do I get there? But okay, no, wonderful. That was quite a nice one to go into. So in terms of being for example, a lead data scientist versus the head of data and AI of a group of companies now in Telkom, in that setting, what would you say is the difference in mindset and the difference in skills or difference in experience that you see one would need to have, or how would you explain the difference between the two?
Great question. Sure. I mean, I think lead data scientist has a slightly narrower focus. So you're much more focused on just project delivery, the kind of team and how you execute. So and those are good. And I guess so. As you move into a bigger role with more responsibility, the context changes. You now, I guess there's much more you need to be doing in terms of investment or funding to kind of grow the team, grow the capability. In a corporate environment, there's lots more politics that you need to help navigate. I guess having a lot of corporate experience, I tend to shield my team from that. So the bureaucracy and the politics, you can't do that completely. But I think having a bit of that barrier and being able to stand up for your team and the capability, I think that's much more part of kind of leading that for the group. Yeah, and then I guess, as I say, the context changes. So now you're thinking further ahead. What is it that the group and the different parts of the business need? Whereas I think at a lead data science level, it's probably a shorter time span that you're concerned about. Although, I mean, having said that, I think from a technology perspective, data science is such an incredibly changing space. It also just means that we're all just always learning and kind of keeping up. So I think kind of from a group perspective, you have on the one hand a lot more of the governance and the policies and the impact on the business that you're thinking about. And as a lead data scientist, it's more about how you get better at executing, how you unlock value.
When you said context and the bigger context, and for example the funding and the politics, etc., my mind went to the idea of the great visualization would be you have a lot more responsibility, you have a lot wider things that you have to think about and consider, a lot other that you generally just wouldn't think about. For example, funding is not something that data science would necessarily think about. They think, oh, we probably do need some money, I guess, for the infrastructure, and we probably do need funding for team members, but that's it. And in my world, I'm like, okay, but cool, they are there. I've got my people. We don't need to execute it, folks, and this is a task for me to deliver. So it's very local focus in terms of, unless obviously the data scientists across different projects, but his projects and his scope, that's his world, and his obvious responsibility is to execute on that. Whereas I'm assuming, and I'm taking from this conversation, that yours is more, it's wider than that. It's across multiple groups, across multiple teams. It's thinking about the whole holistic or the whole system, not just that small area. And then obviously if they fire well on that small system, then all of them fire well, then at the end of the day, your whole system will work well.
Yeah, I like that. No, absolutely. Maybe to add to that, I mean, I think one of the opportunities we've had as we've grown the team on the Telkom side is to not just focus on the data science outputs or delivery side, but to kind of look at across the data value chain. So we've been working quite hard from the almost the foundational elements that look at data governance and how we improve data quality across the group, through then the data engineering pieces that says how do we make data accessible, how do we what platforms and tools do we use, and how do we automate a lot of the work that we do, then into the data science side, which is then more about how we leverage all of these things, or the kind of foundation that we're laying there. And so I guess in the group role, that strategy around, and then you're talking about data culture in the organization and helping drive a change from a much broader perspective, which has been quite exciting. I've got some amazing team leads that are kind of leading these different areas, and it's been fascinating to see how excited they are about tackling those different parts. Yeah.
Nice. When you said data value chain, that's a great way to describe it, and the different areas inside. One of the things that I love to consider and think about is when you do data engineering work, there's obviously building certain data sets for consumption by business, and then there's building the data sets for the feature stores and building the data sets for data science. But it's almost as if at the end of the day, there's different touch points as the data move throughout that value chain, where it can be consumed and used in one way or another, being it fed into a system, being it fed into a dashboard, being it fed into the models, and then used later on. But I mean, yeah, brilliant. So all the different touch points within the data value chain. So moving on a little bit, what are some of your top project wins to date that you can think of?
Sure. Top project wins. I mean, I think we've
top use cases, I
yeah,
guess.
no, we've had some very interesting use cases and some successful and some not. So I'm sure we can cover both aspects. There's lessons to be learned. I think I mean, maybe two to kind of kick off with. One is one that we're busy with at the moment that I'm quite excited about is for the OpenServe part of our business. OpenServe is a kind of network infrastructure provider. So they, if you had a landline, they would have provided the copper DSL services previously to your home. Now that's fiber. And so, but they've got a large technician workforce that deal with installations and faults. And so during COVID, I guess the world changed, and so how we dispatch technicians also needed to change. People were being dispatched from home, and so the dispatch technology didn't really enable us to address, or the business to address that properly. And so there was a lot of wastage that came into the system because of those changes. And so now, post-COVID, we've then been working on an optimization problem to say, how do we help business really improve how we dispatch technicians? And so that has significant cost benefits, efficiency, so it's better customer experience, or when you're restoring faults. So significant value that gets created from it, but also just technically challenging problem because it's significant or quite large data sets and quite diverse data sets. So we're kind of looking at both the fleet movement data, so how the technicians' buckies are kind of moving around so that we can allocate them appropriately, versus the cost of fuel, the type of faults or tickets that they get allocated to their skill levels, what tools they need to have. So there's just layers and layers that kind of get added onto the problem. We're fairly early stages at this point, but my team is quite excited because I think it is quite a challenging problem, and so and I'm excited because I see the value that can emerge from it. Yeah,
that is a nice and a big problem. Like you said, so for example, I'm just picturing this now. So every single technician driving around every day, getting all that data, and I'm assuming there's an operational team, obviously, communicating, telling people where to go, scheduling with the clients or the customers, and so forth. But now, what you guys are going to put on top of that is I'm going to call it an intelligence layer, to then say, listen, great, here was the plan, or instead of a year was the plan, here's the plan for the next week, or here's the plan for the next month, that we've now calculated based on, well, what's the best in terms of performance that we can give for our customers, in terms of the priority of issues that needs to be addressed, in terms of, like you said, the fuel and the cost. And I do agree with you. What I love about that is that can, as that improves, I want to say as that improves the experience and the I wouldn't say reliability, but the time to and the effectiveness of it, suddenly OpenServe as a brand or as a company is going to be perceived a lot better. They're going to address their customers a lot better. And I mean, it's just like a win for everyone with regards to that.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a fascinating problem. So it's the first time that we've done some work in supply chain before, but not kind of in this specific optimization context. So we're also learning as we kind of tackling it. But really interesting. Yeah.
Is there any other use cases as well that is on top of mind?
Yeah, I mean, one of the others, this was maybe going back probably maybe 2.5 years, we came up with this idea around what we call it active listening. So in the Telkom, and this was focused on the Telkom consumer business, so kind of the retail or mobile business. Really what we wanted to do is we wanted to help the business improve customer experience. And so we were thinking about what are the different contexts that we can gather information that allows us to kind of give feedback to the business, to operations, to kind of reduce faults, improve customer experience. And so we broke that down into 3 areas. So what we call external listening. So what feedback or information are we getting from social media or kind of external customers directly into Telkom? Secondly, what are we getting internally? And that's more the direct channels, so call centers, email, kind of chat direct into our service channels. And then the last one we talked about is operational listening. So what feedback are we getting from our processes, and so might be escalations or just almost down to log level. What can we learn where there are problems emerging that we can then use as feedback to operations to address issues more proactively? And so we started kind of initiatives on all 3 of those areas under this umbrella of active listening. And so Telkom was already doing a bit in the external listening side. We helped solve a problem there around just the social media volumes. We had a social media servicing team that they were just overwhelmed by the volume of incoming messages from customers. And so we put a chatbot in place, very simple, but could just triage the messages that are coming in and then pass the relevant ones onto to the service specialists. So that kind of started helping just bring some control into or to control that environment a bit better, and obviously learning a lot from that external data that we're then gathering. In the contact center side, we then started some work around analyzing the conversations that we're having with customers to bring out, to kind of confirm what are the root cause of issues that customers are experiencing, and bring an analytics layer on top of that. And then the operational side, at that point, was probably the most used one, just because the operations team didn't have good visibility into what was causing issues. So just being able to, and this was much more just a data gathering exercise. So pulling data from different systems and visualizing it, and then making that available to supervisors and managers to be able to act. So that was ended up in quite a large body of work to support the operational team. Yeah,
that is really cool. And one thing I love about like Telkom and like the telecommunications world is that you have all these different touch points. You have all these different places where data are being generated. And specific now in the data world, well, that's great because now you can make use of it. And like you said, just gathering that information, displaying it back to the operational team is really very valuable, because then they can make use of it. They can see things they might not have seen before. And if it's prioritized as well, then they can obviously proactively work on the things that are going to cause issues, or that are going to, maybe there's something in the line, maybe there's a tower that's got an issue, or I don't know what the problem is, but there's some problem, then they can proactively obviously work on that and address that. Is there, on the specific use case, are there any kind of metrics you can mention that in terms of impact, or in terms of how it might have changed, or what the difference is in the organization?
In the fixed line fault rate, we had a kind of high volume backup issues, and so helping the business prioritize that, we helped them reduce that from thousands of outstanding kind of backlog issues, and just being able to bring that under control. So that was quite good. Can't remember the volumes.
But I mean, even that's amazing, because now suddenly, or after that, the team now has more time, because they don't have this whole thing that's always been dragging them down, or trying to just work through it, every single day. Once that you reduce that kind of load, and you get to a maintainable state, obviously they can then have more positive impact on the business moving forward, instead of being stuck with all these tickets.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other areas, so the work that we started at that point in time in the contact center side. What we ended up doing is, as a separate project, is build our own automatic speech recognition models for South African languages. So we that allowed us to internally take the contact center conversations and transcribe that into text, and then do text analytics on top of that. And so we then worked to develop that as a separate project and into a product. But we in the internal contact centers where we then deployed that, there we've seen some really good improvements in metrics. So I mean, one of our BCX call centers, I mean, on the quality assurance side, we freed up, I think, probably 40% of the quality assurance team, so that they can do just less manual work, because they now have automated access to and insights into the calls. I think they reduced average handling time by 30 seconds, kind of across their 100,000 calls that they do in a month.
Sure.
I think there was quite good, clear metrics as to the value that could add, but that was like 2.5 years down the line, having refined it through a couple of iterations. Yeah,
it's funny. It's actually good, and it's funny that you mention that, because there's a lot of obviously hype, especially now with ChatGPT and everything that's happening, and there's a lot of people think AI or building out models, specifically enterprise, is magic. And it's like, great, you can as soon as you have the data, you can start building out models. There's automated modeling systems. There's a lot of these things available, but that doesn't mean you're going to see. It's great if you start seeing lift, you start seeing value, but once you have achieved certain milestones, you'll realize, oh wait, hold on, we can do this and this, or we can add this piece of data, or we can apply this model, or we can, and then it starts growing. And eventually, like you said, after a while, as you start realizing and seeing what's available, and as the business users as well start realizing what could be done, then you get to that point after a period of time of engaging and building and engaging and building and iterating, whereas, oh wow, this is an amazing product. Look at what effect this has on the business. I love it. So you mentioned the speech recognition modules and transcribing of text. Is that part of the Izwe.ai?
100%, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Izwe.ai is a collaboration that we started with a startup called Enabler. Enabler, I think, was also a startup that was founded out of Cape AI originally, so also a connection now to Spatialedge, I guess. We met at an AI expo, and we were already experimenting with some machine learning models around automatic speech recognition, and Enabler really focused on data labeling for supervised machine learning models. And so we kind of ventured with them into the area of creating ground truths for audio data, so that we could improve the accuracy of our machine learning models. And so that worked really, we did a proof of concept that worked really well, and we just kind of together saw the opportunity to package this as a product. Enabler had set up through their data annotation capability kind of a platform that gives access to digital workers that could then do the human in the loop elements that's often needed, where businesses need higher levels of accuracy or bespoke labeling or work, and my team could then work more on how we develop the actual platform and then the machine learning models. And so that was a good fit overall. Yeah, and so sure, that's been very exciting. We've obviously deployed that internally in the Telkom group in the contact center context, but we've also expanded that into and started taking it into the market to see if we get some traction. I think traditionally, obviously, there's a lot happening in this space. I mean, you mentioned generative AI. OpenAI released their kind of Whisper technology, which kind of does transcription and translation kind of across a whole host of languages at quite high levels of accuracy. So definitely a fast-paced area. What we find is we can deliver this at low cost, at high accuracy for our local languages still. I mean, we'll need to see, can we compete in the next year? but it's been fascinating, yeah.
But I think that's an important point. So what I love about it is there's a lot of, I guess, Telkom data. There's a lot of, and that's got a lot of local languages with it, and obviously with the correct labeling and with the correctly figuring it out for our local languages, that I think is a key differentiator or key. It'll make it a lot stronger product, and I mean, yes, like a Whisper or there's like normal Google Translate and so forth, but they're very strong on your more English languages, if I can say it as such, or like languages that there's a lot of content available on the internet. I don't think there's that much content available in all 11 languages that we have in South Africa. So that just having obviously that corpus or that body of text available, running it through, and then obviously needing to process it, I think that'll definitely put it up at a different level.
No, absolutely. And so when we started, we were doing kind of single language, so monolingual models. And so you then, when you're in a contact center in South Africa, we often code switch. Hey, I mean, ons sal lekker Afrikaans praat saam met die with the English, and if it's
you switch languages.
Absolutely, and this happens in a contact center. So when you hear it's a agent that speaks your language, you switch over, and so you've got isiZulu and Sesotho and isiXhosa, and so it's a mix of languages. I mean, we were surprised when we started doing some tests for some external companies at the kind of mix. So I think you probably get typically 60%, at least 60% English, and then the other languages start coming through. And so when you are transcribing that and you're just doing English and you're missing 30-40% of what's being said. And so we very quickly started moving into being able to detect different languages. So at least then we could kind of detect what language is being spoken, and then we could apply a monolingual model to those different pieces of language, but realize that isn't an efficient way of kind of dealing with the problem. And so we've kind of shifted to multilingual models where we now kind of, when the model is doing inference, it's actually detecting and then transcribing in that language. So we've only, for that model, we only have that kind of covering English, Afrikaans, isiZulu, and now we're adding Sesotho kind of into that multilingual model as the next step. But I think that's probably the where that future is going, that it doesn't matter. It's not going to be a single language that you're covering. You're really going to be universal language models that we...
Is that a normal thing? I don't think I've heard of that before. I mean, we normally look at a lot of enterprise AI stuff, but this is very cool. So it's
yeah. I mean, I think I haven't seen any of the typical providers in the space doing this yet. I think with OpenAI, these large language models are really set up to start doing that. So so you'll see. I mean, Google, I think, have done some research in this space, and I know they're working on also delivering what they call a universal speech model to market at some point. So yeah, it's definitely happening, and so I think we're on the right track there. And as you say, I think in the local language context there isn't a lot of data, and so having built up a kind of data, or as we build up data in the different languages, I think that's very valuable.
And it'll get better and better. Yeah. That's quite insane. I love that. I love the fact that, but you have to essentially then have a model that can detect different languages. You have to have a model that can then translate it. Otherwise, it's probably going to be garbage. You can be like, wait, what is this guy saying at this point?
Yeah, you missed a lot. Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah,
brilliant. How did it, in terms of like working with external party to try and productize something, like what's that experience like? How is that? How's it? That's not like a normal thing to do as well. I feel like that's quite unique.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's a good question. I think maybe if I take a step back, I think our team from the start, when we were like five people, we had a entrepreneurial spirit here. So I think that's important. I think often I think this wouldn't have happened if we were just a normal analytics team in a corporate. I think we always had the mindset in terms of how we work, that we wanted to be agile, wanted to tackle new problems, we needed to partner, and so can't do everything ourselves. So I think there's definitely a part of that mindset in how we do things. I think I mean, we have also been focused on innovation. So probably about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we started a innovation process within our team, which has been fantastic. So Izwe.ai didn't come out of that process, but there's been a couple of other ideas that have started out of that, and so we coined our innovation process the blue space after the Telkom blue colors, and love the space theme that we could add to it. But effectively, that was just had a facilitated ideation process into idea development, into almost a Dragon's Den type of setup where we could pitch ideas to some of our group execs, and then get funding to prototype and develop ideas. And so, I mean, that was fascinating initiative to start in our team. One of our specialist data scientists just came to me with the idea. I obviously loved it, and she helped drive it. And so I think just with a little bit of support from our leadership side, I mean, this thing grew, and we're now rolling out an innovation management platform for the group. So so extending some of that into the other businesses. So that's I think that's exciting, and I think great. I mean, apart from what we're doing in our team, there's now, I think a bit more than a year ago, Telkom appointed a group head of innovation, and that's been such a good thing to have in the business, because traditionally how you get access to funding is a very rigid process in a telco. So very stringent business case process, and it's focused more on infrastructure. So how much capex or how much capital do I need to roll out more towers or put down more fiber? And so it's been very valuable to now have an ally in this our group innovation officer that could also invest in some of these initiatives with less bureaucracy and red tape. Yeah,
that is fascinating. Especially, the world's changing. That was kind of more of the older mindset of having to create a business case and then very formally go through it. And also, it would probably take a lot of time to get that sorted and get that done. So I love it. It's a.
I mean, sorry, some of our business case templates, it's just hard. I mean, if I give it to so I've done many of those in my life, kind of having grown up in corporate. But when I give it to someone in my team, I mean, I've had experiences where just 3 months later they haven't done anything because they just don't know how to populate. To populate. I mean, all of these questions that come in a typical business case, and so that's been part of the learning for my team, is to say, I mean, yes, you want to pitch a new idea, but you need to be thinking about the financial impact, the competitive impact, the kind of operations business, all of these things as well. And so. Yes. So it's good. It's good experience been a great experience for our team also to just get more of that business and strategy learning under the belt.
There's one thing that was quite interesting when you said blue space. My mind went to blue ocean strategy.
Oh yeah.
So absolutely. I don't know if that was a kind of a play on it, like, hey, there's a blue space instead of the ocean.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I often think about that. No, it is we were definitely talking about blue ocean and red ocean. Yeah.
Okay. and then another thing. This is a bit of a side note, but when you said kind of there's your normal operational work and then doing more R&D or development and innovation. There's a brilliant book I read called Loon Shots a while ago.
Okay.
So, and what they kind of in some way unpack this theory of having your let's call them soldiers who go out and do the work. Now, it depends on the organization, but there's like the delivery of the actual core of the organization or the interaction with the clients. And then you obviously, well, it's obvious, but in many cases, you then have your research and development group who does research, and the whole goal at the end of the day is for the communication to flow properly. Where the research and development group, so that's now your innovation, they build and produce new technologies and products that either enables these so-called soldiers in the field or helps them to sell more of that to the general customer. And so you've always got this beautiful loop where they get all the information in terms of, well, we're trying this new product, it's not working. This is the kind of experience, the expectation we're getting. Now, if it's like, for example, a new venture, and then they can bring it back to those who are doing the research and trying to almost do the startup vibe of getting this thing off the ground. And then you've got a beautiful communication flow in the organization, and you've got ideas, and you've got the funding flowing, and the concept is you should never run out of ideas or innovation. You will then become a big, massive. But anyway, interesting book.
Yeah,
Side note,
awesome.
it just made me totally think about this now when you kind of explained the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, in some, that's pretty good. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the questions we often talk about from a culture perspective is if you, I mean, can we change the organization inside out? Or, I mean, there's often this theory, and I guess it comes from exponential organizations as well, where in some cases you need to incubate things outside of the organization. Because if you do it within the organization, it'll just be it's typically you get a lot of resistance, and so it's hard to integrate. And so for us as a team, maybe in a if I think about this a little bit differently, when we started, it felt somehow that we were apart from the rest of the business. So we were kind of a new initiative, almost a new venture in terms of the data science team that was started up in the Telkom group, and so we had this entrepreneurial culture, and then we were increasingly moved more towards the center. And part of what that did is it meant that it was great in the sense that as we moved into the strategy office and more into the center of the business, we had access to more fundamental problems. So we could kind of engage in really strategic issues across the group. But because we had come from outside of the business, it often felt as though we didn't have easy access into the business. So it was much harder when you're developing a solution to integrate it into business. And so we had some failures as well, kind of at the start, because we didn't have enough business buy into what we were then trying to do, because you get the mandate from the group CEO to do something, but then the kind of CEOs or C-suite in the different businesses are then not necessarily aligned, and so you end up kind of really struggling to incubate new things kind of from the inside. Yeah, so I think there's so much.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I actually almost want to ask you, given what you know now, how would you almost structure a let's call it data analytics function within an organization?
That's a terrible question.
It's a hard one.
Yeah, I mean, I think these things work in cycle. So it's definitely dependent on the organization. Absolutely has. So what is most business already have BI and analytics functions kind of scattered across, if it's a group across the different businesses or different departments. I mean, you'll have business intelligence in servicing operations and in finance and sales, and so you need to think how well established are those different areas. Do you need a central function that can lead and enable, can drive governance? What is the role that you want a central function to play? And so, I mean, what I've seen is that businesses go through cycles. Every 3 to 5 years, you kind of shift from having kind of either a COE or a central model where you're integrating more into business, and business builds up their own capability. And so I think it's a kind of an ebb and flow. I don't think there's a right model. Yeah.
I also don't think there's a right one, but I thought it'd be interesting to ask you, and I love your approach of almost like depends on the business, depends on the context. If the context is such that the business is, let's almost say their initiative this year or the mandate is they want to really more focus on internal operational tooling in terms of AI and data, then 100%, like you said, a more essentially integrated system. If it is, look, we want to enable a lot of different use cases and a lot of different units within a lot of different businesses, maybe spreading out the data scientists and some of the analysts a bit more to then bring some of that information back in. Also don't know 100% what the ideal is, but what we've also worked with and seen in a lot of organizations is some blend almost between those things, where you do have a central area of educational or education happening within and the capabilities being built and the processes being set, and kind of people know, okay, well, this is how we do things. These are kind of technologies we generally use. Here's how we share information, all of that. But also needing to connect with, let's say, a separate part of the group, but more of a separate entity, because I've seen in some organizations that you can be part of the group, but you have your own culture in this organization, like very different, very own setup, but you still need to help them in some way or form. So now maybe you have 1 or 2 or 3 data scientists that's more embedded there, or analysts more embedded there, but they're still connected to the central entity by, I don't know, even just spending their time 2 days there, 3 days there, whatever it may be, but some blend eventually always ends up happening.
No, absolutely. And I mean, we've set ourselves up so that we can also incubate BI and analytics functions within some of the businesses. So a couple of years ago, we one of our SME focused business that services I think about 600,000 small businesses in South Africa. So they were quite a lean operational team and didn't have, they had spun off one of the other parts of the business and didn't have a BI or reporting or analytics team. And so we started putting that together for them. That wasn't our core functions. We're less focused on just normal operational reporting, but obviously we could do that, and so we helped them put the systems in place and resource, kind of staff up the resources, and then I think in the end it took us about 1.5 to 2 years before we then moved that into their business, and so that worked really well. I mean, exceptional capability and good story. Then another year later, they moved the broader business, kind of integrated that back into one of the other businesses, and that business already had a analytics team, and so that then kind of brought these two teams together, and has been really hard to get them integrated. So it's been So I mean, I think Telkom has been a very interesting experience for me, in particular because we talk about almost the road to independence. So Telkom as a group traditionally or previously was quite integrated, but increasingly they are separating out the different businesses, and so trying to have a leaner corporate center or holding company that reduces the costs, and so there's more autonomy in each of the businesses, and so with that then comes also kind of having more autonomy around how they do analytics or data science in each of those businesses. And so that also changes our role or our mandate as we deliver services to them.
Does that make it easier or harder?
It makes, it does make it harder, absolutely, because you have less control. And I think if you so it's much more about getting buy-in. I think that's normal. I think we'd probably have to go through the same effort, but I guess it also just speaks to the context of where the business is going. Also drives what model kind of will suit from a data analytics perspective.
Okay, so we did venture off a little bit into very interesting stories and interesting use cases and some interesting ideas. On to one of the other questions. Could you maybe tell me a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced maybe in the past year, how you kind of guys resolved it or got to some resolution, and then what lessons you could maybe share from those experiences?
Okay, no, sure. I mean, I think for us, because we're a central team, mandate is often a question we come up against. Yes, we've got fantastic backing from our group CEO, and that's he's always been quite visible in supporting our capability, which has opened a lot of doors. But when it comes to operational implementation of data science solutions, the Telkom culture has often been a bit defensive. So this is my domain, and we're now seen as almost an external party or third party to that business, and so getting the right mandate just to be able to work in each of the businesses' environment and then in particular to access data, because often the different businesses still have different systems that kind of on which they run their operations, and so some of that's already set up to, and in large part, much of that flows into a central data warehouse, and so that makes it easier. But often when we tackle new projects, we're venturing into areas where we need to start collecting data or start accessing data for the first time. And that then, I think, has been tricky. So, I mean, I guess on the one hand, we try and solve that through formal processes. So so we've had to do data sharing agreements between the different businesses in the corporate center to say, your CEO signed here and said we can have access to the data. So that gives you kind of more formal backing, but in the end, it's very relational. I mean, where we get most traction is that where we know the operation people well, we build strong relationships, and they start trusting you, and I mean, eventually, you actually make the most progress. Yeah, so that's been one of the challenges. Sorry, I don't know if
a quick question there. Actually, none of the companies inside the group compete with each other.
There are some there is some overlap. Yeah. So
because that would make it very challenging, I believe. We're like, okay, but I'm going to share something with you, but is he also going to share something?
No, absolutely. And so I mean, if you kind of dial back before my time in the Telkom group, 2013, when Sipho Maseko just started as CEO of the group, Telkom had competition commission finding against them. I think there was a fine of about 2 billion rand that eventually got reduced to I think a couple of 100,000 rand. But as part of the resolution of that competition commission findings, there had to be increased separation between the businesses, and so. That does mean that there's also data separation in some of those areas, so that the consumer business and the wholesale network infrastructure provider, that there's some arm's length, and it's often more to do with pricing, I think, on the competition side, not so much around data, but we still have some of that we deal with even today still. Yeah.
Sure. Super interesting. Anyway, so you're saying still any other challenges?
Yeah. What are the other challenges? I mean, I think, and this is, I think, every time I'm at a conference or a data talk, retention or just kind of skills in this space is always comes up. I think we've been fortunate that we've had a kind of a strong pipeline of talent that we gain access to through BCX's sponsorship of the Explore Data Science Academy. So we work quite closely with them, and so that's been a great feeder for kind of young talent in data science and engineering. But that's also quite junior talent, and so we work quite hard then to mature them, and but obviously, I mean, this is because it's a highly sought after skills, you do end up having quite a bit of change, people leaving. And so, yeah, I think that's always a challenge. In particular, I think what we found in our case is that we had a strong leadership team, but then had at one point had quite a bit of change in our senior data scientists, and so we ended up with a large group of kind of specialists and junior data scientists, and that was a little bit off balance. So it's taken a bit of time to kind of grow up the talent in the team so that they can operate well at that senior data science level, and then kind of find good resources that then stick with the business. Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you also find that in in the customers that you engage with.
100%. No, get talent shortage, big thing, and just it's one of the big problems is a lot of the things that we're doing are difficult problems. Technology can help you, and it does help you quite a lot in terms of, I already mentioned like AutoML or something like that. It's like it's great, and you get all these tools and these things, but in terms of solving the kinds of problems that exist, and like let's say I'm talking about juicy problems, like for example, the one you mentioned earlier, the operational one where there's multiple layers on top of it, and you want to get like have a good impact and get a good lift out of it. That's a hard problem to solve. So you need obviously good talent and people to be able to figure those things out, which 100% agree. It's difficult. And I mean, not only is there shortage, obviously a lot of companies are looking for it, and then you always have something like Amazon coming to South Africa or having development centers or whatever it may be, and then talent being sucked up or people leaving South Africa for abroad for other opportunities, and then you're like, okay, well, what am I going to do about this? No, there's a lot of it's fascinating, fascinating stuff.
To just jump in there, I mean, I think what we have found is that, I mean, I guess we also have to realize that you'll never have all of the expertise, or you can never have all of the expertise you need in a permanent team. I mean, you're going to have problems that you need to solve that you've just never done before, and it doesn't make sense to spend months kind of acquiring the skill. So we also trying out different models there. How do we access international talent for certain kind of in certain use cases or problems, or are there partners that have done this before so that we don't have to invent it ourselves? And so, although we love building stuff, we realize we can't do everything, and so and that's been quite tricky in the Telkom context, where we have a history in terms of procurement that comes out of state-owned enterprise side. So very strict procurement governance, and so it's been hard to be more flexible in terms of how we access resources. And so, but we've learned some good lessons, and I think we're making good headway there. I think increasingly, as we're working much more closely with our BCX part of the business, and they also kind of more set up to and more flexible kind of in that way.
So in terms of the talent and in terms of keeping talent, is there anything that you guys are trying to do or try to do in terms of retaining some of the talent and then growing them out?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, it's something we come back to probably 2 or 3 times a year, just because we do have often have changes in the team. Our team is about 50 people at the moment, and so I think just natural attrition kind of means that we have to pay attention to that. I think for me, the most significant thing is challenging work. So having problems that the team is excited about tackling, that they're learning and feeling they kind of growing in terms of the capability. But then we have to deal with many of the other kind of just standard stuff here. So pay well. One of the things we've struggled. Yeah, I mean, I guess. But people are also different here. Some people, but you have to get, I guess, some of the basics right. And so Telkom does pay well, which is good. Helps us retain staff. Things like training and flexible way of work. I think in our types of environment, that's really important. I think even before COVID, we already had a kind of remote working, or we're set up to work remotely, and so we weren't that impacted when COVID hit. And I think one of the things that we've struggled with, so half of my team is based in Cape Town and half in Centurion, and so we originally started the team here in Cape Town, and I'm based in Cape Town. I used to travel up before COVID once a week, did the commute to Centurion. To kind of serve our clients there, yeah. But in Centurion, we've got fantastic offices, really lovely. Both the Telkom and the BCX offices are really modern, and all gyms and cafeterias and all of the things.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, I mean, the Telkom office has a bank and a post office and all of these things, so you can basically live there if you wanted to. But here in Cape Town, we didn't, and so we ended up moving offices quite a bit, because we still, before COVID, we still needed it. Felt like we needed an office, and so that was, I found that was quite hard for the team originally to kind of not have we started out in a really cool space, but outgrew that quite quickly. and then had to stick to some of the Telkom offices, and the Telkom offices in Cape Town were really dodgy old buildings. And so we had to navigate our way around that. But even office space, I mean, those are all things that you need to get right. So the work environment. But I think for me, the type of work that you do and the culture and the team are probably the things that that make people stay. If they feel valued and they're doing awesome work, then I think that that's the part of the magic syrup.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So in terms of our office space, obviously also COVID, everybody's remote, all that whole thing, and then literally as soon as we not exactly as soon as we could come back, but like I think after the second lockdown, when people started coming back, in the beginning it was like I think 70% mostly at the office, 30% more remote. Now I think it's pretty much I think we're at the point where you've got like 2 or 3 or maybe 4 guys who's like, I'm going to be remote most of the time, but the rest, people are coming in, they want to be at the office, they want to be here, they want to interact with other people, they want to have chats, participate. It's interesting. So there's even though you'd think, guys, the typical person in this space wouldn't necessarily want to interact. These guys love interacting with each other, and they love sharing those ideas and working on those challenges. And for me, I love being in the office. The one thing that just makes a big difference is the speed of communication, the speed of sharing ideas versus having to Slack somebody or get on a call and get on a call on a predetermined time, and then having that bit of a barrier over the computer. Absolutely. It's just, there's a difference. So 100% agree with you. If your space is nice and a good space to work in, it'll definitely facilitate a lot of that interaction. But nice. No, I love what you said in terms of all the different things and how you guys are trying to work on it more, and it's a continuous thing, obviously. Like, what can we do better? What can we improve upon? What is possible? What is plausible also? I mean, some things might not be as plausible. I don't know if you guys can put a pool in one of the places, but maybe somebody wanted that other than a gym. It's quite cool. In the Telkom perspective, how does like a use case success get measured?
Sure, yeah. So I guess my boss is absolutely value focused. So I don't have a conversation with him without talking about value. And so yeah, I mean, we've built how we measure value kind of into all of our processes. So when we get a request right up front, we already doing an initial assessment to say, what is the expected value from this use case or this piece of work? And so if we don't start a project without having kind of looked at what are the value drivers and doing a estimate of what we expect the value might be, then we've tried a number of ways to kind of then measure value as we work on projects and iterate. So I love this idea of having leading and lagging indicators. So a leading indicator is something that you can kind of test now. You get immediate feedback, and you expect that to kind of lead into the value that you expect to create and measure after the fact. So if you're measuring improvement in sales as your lagging indicator, then you need to know, I mean, what are the leading indicators? If it's a kind of leads on a website, then it's how many people are hitting your website. So if you can measure the leading indicators, then that helps you. If you can identify them, then that helps you kind of track that success through the process. And then I guess benefit tracking as we implement. And so, I mean, it's been hard. We've gone through cycles where we try and assess to what extent do we need to measure the intangible value. I think there's tangible value around cost savings, so quite easy to measure. If you're automating a process, how many hours of work are you saving, or if you're selling more product, to kind of measure the direct outcome of that. But if you're reducing risk or then there are some benefits of value that's then harder to measure. And so we've tried kind of matrices with kind of risk indicators and things like that. We found that it's not always necessary to go down to that level of detail. To some extent, having the stakeholder bought into the process and the value that they expect, even if it's intangible, and then meeting their expectations has been a good measure in some of those in those projects as well. So we often do, or quite regularly do, kind of stakeholder feedback, get NPS ratings on our projects and the team, and that helps kind of keep a tab on how we're doing in certain projects. Yeah, but I think having come from an actuarial background, we're quite strong on kind of estimating value. What we find is the realized value that you then measure after the fact often is quite different from what you expect. So we are, and maybe that's my nature as well, overly optimistic when we head into these projects. And so I guess also I've learned to temper my enthusiasm in terms of what you can achieve or how long it'll take to achieve it. But I guess that's normal. And so we try not to oversell when we head into new projects, because that, that's not good for your long-term investment case.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but value, very important. I mean, one of the newer concepts that we've started thinking about when we think about value is often when we do projects, we measure the value of a project independently. So we kind of assess this is going to be a cross-sell or a churn impact. This is this kind of extent or the products that will be covered, and so that's the benefit or the value that will be realized. But increasingly, we're moving to a model where we are looking at what we talk about as data and AI assets, where we're saying, can we increase the value across use cases by improving the quality of a specific data asset? So if we have a cross-sell and a churn use case, if we are improving the data quality for in a certain area, that should affect both of those use cases and actually increase the value that's emerging out of both of them. And so you're ending up multiplying the impact rather than just having additive impact. And so that moves you to a space where your value starts increasing exponentially rather than just kind of project by project kind of trying to add value. So that is a good space to be moving into, where we're getting it right in certain areas, but a lot of the work that we do is still kind of isolated projects, but I think that it feels like that's a good area to kind of get into to really unlock more value.
No, that makes a lot of sense. In our methodology as well in our organization is whenever we engage with a client, whatever project or use case it is, it's business value first, as far as you can get it, because that is the rands and cents are the one things that
sell it. Yeah.
I mean, the business needs to make money. Whatever you're going to do for them in some instance has to help them, and if the point is to obviously try and help them make more money. But you mentioned something very important there as well. That's intangible value, or intangible assets, or maybe what I would like to say strategic value to an organization. And that can sometimes happen where, for example, you want to measure something specific, or there's a specific model needs to be built to, I can't think of any examples now, but there might be strategic value in it. It's not as easy as you mentioned to measure the rands and cents, but there is some strategic value and it could improve overall. I love the idea of knowing what the improvement in quality of a data set could have an impact down the line, and almost justifying the work needed, almost the work needed in capabilities as well that can affect use cases down the line. But then one thing you mentioned there as well, which made me think about is repeatability and reuse of some of the projects. So if you've invested into something, then potentially repeating or reusing it. I'm assuming you guys also have had a look at that before, or try and see where you could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I mean, I've got a couple of examples where we get that right, and then when we don't get that right. And so, I mean, churn was a good example for us. So we had started developing churn models for our consumer business, and then leveraging very similar data, we could take that and apply very similar models. And so within a couple of weeks, we could deploy that in our SMME business, and then we could take that and I think within I think about 2 or 3 months later, we deployed that in our enterprise business. And the enterprise business wasn't the exact same fit, but we could reuse a lot of those components, and then what happened was, so for example, we then introduced SHAP explainability model on top of the first churn model that we built on the consumer side, and what that then did is we could then immediately apply that to the other two contexts as well without having to redo the work. So when you then kind of making a change in one area, you should then be able to leverage that kind of across. And so I guess where we see that heading in the future is that we are putting down more of a machine learning operations environment that allows us to bring more automation into how we move data from source into training models, and then into how that's then implemented into the business. And so that helps us give visibility to the data science team of the different models and assets that we're creating. And so theoretically should increase that reusability and contribution from different parts of the team to kind of into existing models. But that's still fairly early days. Very excited about that. I think it's I think it's going to be really important going forward.
100%. What do you believe are the more important things that we should be talking about when it comes to the AI and data industry? So in other words, what are the I won't say fallacies, but what are the consumption, the notion people have in their heads, or the ideas that they have, and what would you say is more reality, like expectation versus reality inside the industry itself?
Sure. Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I guess, I mean, I think, I don't know, it feels like we are at a point in the kind of cycle of AI that there's a big shift, and certainly an awareness of AI. I mean, AI has been used for many, many years in applications that people use daily. But it hasn't been visible, and certainly hasn't been accessible to them to use. I think with a shift in generative AI over the past few years, that's made AI suddenly accessible to everyone. I mean, my son is 14 years old. He's loving engaging with ChatGPT. My wife, when she needs to send an important email, she'll get it to kind of put the email in a polite and formal, less formal structure or whatever. And so I think, I don't know, it feels like I'm not sure how this is changing the landscape for AI. I mean, when I speak to my team, I hear some concerns about what this means for us as a team, how we operate, what skills we should be focusing on to make sure we're still relevant in 3 to 5 years' time. But I know it also brings significant opportunity. So the application of AI is just growing tremendously, and I think we'll see that pace continue to increase over the next few years. I mean, we often in the use cases that we tackle, we deal with issues around the impact of automation. And so job losses, and what does this mean for me and my job? And if we play that forward into the future of work, then I think, sure, it's there's some very interesting questions there around what your kid, your first child will grow up, the world that they'll grow up in. Hey, Yeah, certainly we'll have very different job types in the future. But I think some of the questions that leads to is how do we use AI for good? What are the social impacts that it can have? But I think how does the way our future of work change from that perspective? So,
that's
very interesting.
That's a good answer. The one thing that tickled my brain there when you mentioned almost job loss, but also not more around the fact that when you delivering use cases within an organization and you engaging with a certain function, let's say called the marketing team or the operational team, time and time again, if they haven't really done this before, if they haven't really engaged with the kind of models you're building. Now, you guys sound a little bit more mature, a little bit more having gone probably through this already. But what we've experienced is you say, listen, we're going to automate this, we're going to add this, you're going to be able to do this thing that you're doing in a month within a few days, or maybe within hours, it'll be able to have the information. They get fearful and almost distrustful in terms of, whoa, I mean, no, I've been doing this for 20 years. There's no way you're going to spend, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months developing something that's going to replace what I've done for the past 20 years. It's a big level of resistance. But the fascinating thing is that what we've found now in the solutions we've developed is that experience is still necessary. All we're doing is we're taking away a lot of, I must say, a little bit of a grind work or unnecessary work. Absolutely. And suddenly, once that use case has been delivered, maybe the best one that I can reference right now is, let me just think about which, operational planning or demand forecasting. And planning within retail organizations. Now, before there was kind of proper demand forecasting, and before they had a good automated demand planning system, they would almost do it manually within Excel. So manually, but automated within Excel, and working with multiple screens, that kind of thing would take them probably 3 weeks to properly see what's going on, and then they could work that down to maybe doing it in a couple of days. But there's still a lot of time they have to spend to figure things out. And there's not a lot of flexibility in the system. But once you then introduce this new technology and this new system, suddenly they can do it within seconds or within a day, because all the data is being pulled out of the systems, it's being correctly manipulated. They can still create maybe some of their own reports or whatever they want, and still dig in to understand it. But now, because there's this shortened time frame, they can almost on a daily basis look at it and say, wait, hold on, we need to change something here. We need to change this plan. We need to rather do this. Oh, there's a backlog here. What can we do about it? And now they become way more involved in what they actually want to do and actually helping the business deliver value, instead of being like, oh, I have to now spend 3 or 4 days because I don't actually know. And I'm not going to get to this because I've got other stuff and I need to sort out. They're free of that. Now it changes their behavior. Now they've got a bigger impact in the business. At least that's what
No, absolutely. I mean, we've just had a fantastic example of that in our procurement space. So some really good work happening there. They've got good control over spend across the business, but a lot of manual process and how data it kind of comes into their system, and then how the reports are maintained, and so it's been good to see that if you then set that up properly, just how you can free up capacity to actually deliver more meaningful insights and output. So no, I fully agree with that. And I think, I mean, I believe, I mean, it's like, I think Jan LeCun used this analogy around electricity. So when electricity was introduced for the first time, it changed, I mean, obviously it changed the world when cars were introduced. When you built the first car, you didn't have all of the process and the guardrails spread. You didn't have proper roads and traffic lights and seat belts and everything that helps you manage and govern car travel as you do now. Hey? Now, these days, there's still many accidents, but you've got rules of the road, proper roads with good governance. And I guess as we move into this new world where AI is increasingly being applied, we're going to need the same types of governance and rules to be developed, but it's not going to be there from the start. And so we're going to have to learn and see what are what are the kind of positive and negative impacts, and then try to address that over time in more systemic ways. But those things do take time, and so I guess we'll have to see how that plays out.
And a great answer. I thought, okay, so in terms of the position that you're in, you're able to see a lot of different data scientists, junior and senior, in the organization, and how they perform and what they're able to achieve. If there's an aspiring data scientist out there listening to this now and wondering, well, what can I do to become a great data scientist? Is there any advice, any recommendations you would give?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think what I've learned moving into the world of data science is that you have to be learning continuously. And so I think, I mean, when I started out my career, that definitely wasn't the mindset. Every year you maybe went on a course or two because you had to, but we weren't focused on learning on the job and really kind of staying abreast of what's happening. And I think most data science teams and organizations have that almost as a key value, and that's absolutely necessary. So you have to be continuously developing your skills. I think the second thing for me that I really value and see so much benefit from is data science that are able to understand business context. So not just being able to deliver technically, but can also engage and learn more about how the business operates and start to understand over time what are the kind of strategic levers that they can help influence through their data science solutions. And so that takes time, but I think being willing to open yourself up to not just understand the data science and technical context, but also the business context, and to learn more about that, to be open to that part, I think is tremendously valuable, and that's where we often see biggest impact in the end. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to end off with, that's another episode of the AI Industry Insights. Thank you so much, Stefan, for coming through today and having this wonderful discussion. I think this is quite a beefy episode. But yeah, thank you so much.
Great. It's a great pleasure.